The brother he never knew. The morning sun cast a golden glow across Fifth Avenue, touching the polished windows of expensive boutiques and casting long shadows between the tall buildings. Alexander Hayes walked with his daughter Lily's small hand tucked safely in his own, her patent leather shoes clicking against the sidewalk in an uneven rhythm that made him smile. Saturday mornings were sacred. No matter how many meetings waited, no matter how many deals hung in the balance, Saturdays belonged to Lily. They had their routine. Breakfast at the corner cafe where the owner knew to bring extra whipped cream for Lily's hot chocolate. A walk through Central Park. Sometimes a visit to the bookstore where Lily could spend an hour choosing just the right story. Today, Lily had chosen shopping. At 5 years old, she developed opinions about her wardrobe that both amused and exhausted Alexander. She wanted a new dress for her upcoming birthday party, something with sparkles, she'd insisted at breakfast. Lots of sparkles. Daddy, look at that one, Lily said, pointing at a window display featuring a princess-themed collection. Her curly blonde hair bounced as she tugged at his hand. Alexander smiled down at her, his heart expanding the way it always did when he looked at his daughter. She was his whole world, had been since the day she was born. Being a single father wasn't something he'd planned, but it was the greatest gift his short-lived marriage had given him before it fell apart. We'll go in after we get some lunch, he promised. You need more than hot chocolate in your stomach. Lily pouted but nodded, skipping alongside him as they continued down the sidewalk. The street was busy with weekend shoppers, tourists with cameras, couples holding hands. New York hummed with life, and for once, Alexander felt part of it rather than separate from it. They were passing an upscale restaurant, its outdoor tables occupied by well-dressed patrons, when Lily suddenly stopped walking. Her hand went rigid in his. Daddy, she whispered, her voice strange, thin. Alexander looked down at her, then followed her gaze. Near the restaurant's entrance, partly hidden by a decorative planter, stood a boy. It was maybe 8 or 9 years old, wearing clothes that had seen better days. His dark hair was messy, his face smudged with dirt. He held a piece of bread in both hands, eating it with the careful attention of someone who didn't know when the next meal might come. Alexander's first instinct was to guide Lily away. Not out of cruelty, but out of the complicated discomfort that came with witnessing poverty in the midst of plenty. He'd written checks to homeless shelters, to children's charities, but confronting it directly was different. But Lily wasn't moving. She was staring at the boy with an intensity that made Alexander uneasy. Lily, come on, sweetheart, he said gently. She didn't respond. Her blue eyes were fixed on the boy's face, and her own face had gone pale. Alexander felt a flutter of concern. Was she scared? Upset? Then Lily pulled her hand from his and took a step toward the boy. Alexander reached for her instinctively, but she was already moving, walking toward the child with a strange certainty in her steps. Lily, Alexander said, more firmly now, following her. The boy looked up as they approached. His eyes were dark, wary, the eyes of someone who'd learned not to trust easily. He clutched his bread tighter, as if they might take it from him. Lily stopped a few feet away, staring at him with that same intense focus. Then she turned to Alexander, and her small face crumpled with emotion. Tears filled her eyes, spilling down her cheeks. Daddy, she said, her voice breaking. Daddy, that's my brother. The words hit Alexander like a physical blow. The busy street seemed to fade away. The sounds of traffic and conversation became distant and muffled. All he could hear was his daughter's voice, repeating those impossible words. That's my brother. That's Tommy. Alexander's legs felt weak. He stared at the boy, really looked at him for the first time. Dark hair, yes, but it had a wave to it that seemed familiar. The shape of his nose. The set of his jaw. And those eyes, dark where Lily's were blue, but the same shape, the same way of looking at the world with careful observation. Lily, what are you talking about? Alexander managed, his voice hoarse. From the pictures, Lily said, wiping at her tears with the back of her hand. Mommy showed me pictures before she left. She said I had a brother but he lived far away. She said his name was Tommy and she missed him very much. The world tilted. Alexander felt his knees buckle, and he sank down onto the sidewalk, not caring about his expensive suit or the people staring. His mind was racing, fragments of memory crashing together. His ex-wife, Clyde. Their brief, tumultuous marriage. The way she'd sometimes seemed haunted by something she wouldn't discuss. The photos he'd found once, hidden in a drawer, of a baby boy he didn't recognize. When he'd asked, she'd claimed it was a nephew. He'd believed her because he'd wanted to believe her, because doubt would have meant confronting harder truths. She'd left when Lily was 2 years old, unable to cope with motherhood, with marriage, with any of it. She'd signed away custody without a fight and disappeared from their lives. Alexander had been relieved, ashamed of his relief, and focused entirely on giving Lily the stability her mother couldn't provide. They'd never known about a son. Another child. A boy who would have been 3 or 4 years older than Lily. A boy who might have been abandoned the same way Claire had tried to abandon Lily. The boy, Tommy, was backing away, frightened by the crying child and the man who'd collapsed on the sidewalk. He clearly had no idea what was happening. Alexander forced himself to breathe, to think. He looked at Lily, at her tear-stained face, at the absolute certainty in her eyes. Then he looked at the boy, really looked, and saw the resemblance he'd been too shocked to process before. The wave in his hair was exactly like Claire's. The shape of his face, the way he held himself, defensive but not broken. "Tommy," Alexander said softly, his voice shaking. "Is your name Tommy?" The boy froze, his eyes wide. "How do you know my name? How old are you?" Alexander asked. "Nine," the boy said warily. "Why? Where are your parents?" Tommy's face hardened. "Don't have any. I'm fine on my own." The words broke something in Alexander's chest. He thought of this child, alone on the streets, while he'd been raising Lily in comfort and safety. While he'd been completely unaware that somewhere out there was another child who might share his daughter's blood, who might be part of their family. "Tommy," Alexander said, his voice thick with tears he couldn't hold back anymore. "I think I might be your father." The boy stared at him, confusion and hope and fear warring on his face. "I don't have a father. My mom said he didn't want me." The pain of those words was physical. Alexander pressed a hand to his chest, trying to breathe through it. "I didn't know," he managed. "I swear to you, I didn't know you existed. If I had known, if I had any idea." Lily had moved closer to Tommy, no longer crying but watching him with that intense, assessing look children have. "You look like the pictures," she said firmly. "You're my brother." Tommy looked between them, this well-dressed man crying on the sidewalk and this little girl with absolute certainty in her eyes. "I don't understand," he whispered. Alexander stood on shaking legs and pulled out his phone. His hands trembled as he scrolled through photos until he found one of Claire, taken years ago. He held it out to Tommy. "Is this your mother?" Tommy's face transformed. He reached for the phone, touched the screen with a dirty finger. "That's her. That's my mom. But she's been gone for a long time." "Gone where?" Alexander asked gently. "She left me at a shelter 2 years ago, said she couldn't take care of me. Said she was sorry but she couldn't be what I needed." Tommy's voice was flat, practiced, the tone of someone who'd told this story too many times. "I ran away from the shelter. I take care of myself now. 2 years ago, right around the time she'd left them too. Claire had abandoned both of her children, unable to face the responsibility, the weight of motherhood." Alexander felt anger flash through him, hot and sharp, before being swallowed by overwhelming grief. He knelt down again, bringing himself to Tommy's level. "Tommy, I'm Alexander Hayes. This is Lily. If what we think is true, if you're Claire's son, then you're my stepson at the very least, and you're Lily's half-brother. And I'm so sorry that you've been alone. I'm sorry I didn't know. I'm sorry for everything you've been through." Tears were streaming down his face now, and he didn't care who saw. "But you're not alone anymore. Not if you don't want to be. Tommy stood frozen, the bread still clutched in his hands, his eyes searching Alexander's face for lies, for the trick, for the disappointment that would come. Lily stepped forward and took Tommy's hand. "We have a big house," she said simply. "And my room is pink, but we could paint yours blue if you want. And Daddy makes really good pancakes on Sunday mornings." Something in the boy's face cracked. A single tear rolled down his dirty cheek, cutting a clean path through the grime. "I don't want to be alone anymore," he whispered. Alexander reached out, slowly, giving Tommy time to pull away. When he didn't, Alexander pulled the boy into his arms, holding him tight. Tommy's thin body shook with sobs, years of loneliness and fear pouring out. Lily wrapped her small arms around both of them, and the three of them stood there on the busy sidewalk, passers-by flowing around them like water around stones. "You're not alone," Alexander repeated, his voice fierce with promise. "You're never going to be alone again. You're coming home. You're coming home with us." And there, in the middle of Fifth Avenue, with the morning sun warming their backs and his daughter's hand in his, Alexander Hayes' family suddenly, unexpectedly, became complete.